The push for zero emissions is fueling a wave of exciting technological innovations backed by government funding worldwide. Groundbreaking achievements like carbon capture, green and blue hydrogen, and advancements in battery storage are making steady progress. In the meantime, pollution leaders like Russia and the US are successfully lowering emissions by increasing their use of natural gas. And now, Australia is joining this global shift. Australia's Northern Territory stands on the cusp of an energy revolution, potentially unveiling one of the last major natural gas discoveries on Earth. This development holds significant implications for both energy security and affordability, not only for Australia, but potentially for global markets as well. Despite past challenges extracting resources, a breakthrough came in the mid-1990s when geologists identified the Beetaloo Basin as a shale formation rich in natural gas. This discovery was ahead of its time. However, in the last 2 decades, industry-changing advancements in drilling technology and extensive subsurface data have led to significant improvements. And now the vast natural gas reserves in the Beetaloo Basin are ready to be tapped.
So why does hydraulic fracturing work? And why does hydraulic fracturing in combination with horizontals work? It's all about surface area.
It's essential to look back at the US shale revolution, which transformed the global energy landscape and paved the way for similar developments worldwide. It began in the early 2000s with the advent of horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing. These techniques made it possible to extract oil and natural gas from shale rock formations, which was previously too difficult and expensive.
Because of new technologies, because we can now access natural gas that we couldn't access before in an economic way, we've got a supply of natural gas under our feet that can last America nearly 100 years. And developing it could power our cars and our homes and our factories in a cleaner and cheaper way.
This led to a surge in domestic production, making the US a top energy producer, lowering prices, reducing reliance on foreign oil, creating jobs, and even lowering carbon emissions by replacing coal with cleaner burning natural gas. It showcased the transformative power of technology in the energy sector. In April 2015, a quiet shift unfolded in the heart of America's energy landscape. Natural gas surpassed coal as the largest source of electricity in the US. This milestone was not just a numerical shift, it was a breath of fresher air. When burned for energy, natural gas produces about half the carbon dioxide emissions compared to coal. The shale gas revolution fueled an industrial renaissance in the US by driving down energy prices, which revitalized manufacturing and other energy-intensive industries. Beyond just reducing emissions, the transition to natural gas has led to cleaner air, especially in regions like Southeast Asia, where the conversion to natural gas has resulted in less smog and particulate matter, improving overall air quality. This transition underscores a growing commitment to reducing the carbon footprint and mitigating the impacts of climate change, while also offering tangible benefits in public health and economic growth. That brings us to Darwin, a hidden gem nestled in the Northern Territory, ranking 16th in population size in all of Australia with just 151,000 residents. Although cities like Sydney and Melbourne on the East Coast are bustling with millions, Darwin stands alone up north, where its charm is found in its remoteness and unique character. Surprisingly, many people, including Australians, are unaware of Darwin's significance.
I would think that most Australians don't know about Darwin. Like there's this little colony, this little city up here that just exists by itself. And for most people, they couldn't point at it on a map.
Even when including the rest of the Northern Territory's population, adding around 100,000, it only moves up to the 14th spot. And compare this to the size and population of Texas, and you'll begin to really understand the significance.
The Northern Territory has double the landmass of Texas, and then the population in Texas is about 25 million, and we've got about 250,000 here. 1% of the population, double the landmass, and a gas play that is compared to the Marcellus. That's the size of the opportunity and the extent to which we need to rely on expertise from interstate and build supply chains to optimize that here.
Australia is home to a diverse population, including about 812,000 Indigenous people, Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders, according to the 2021 census. That makes up around 3.2% of the country's population. In the Northern Territory, more than 61,000 Indigenous people live there, making up over a quarter of the region's population, which is 5 times higher than the national average. The Northern Territory has rolled out various initiatives and agreements aimed to improving justice outcomes and respecting the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities, or as they're commonly referred to in the Northern Territory, traditional owners, or native title holders.
In 1993, the Native Title Act came into play across Australia. That was after a fellow by the name of Eddie Mabo took his land claim to the High Court and he won. So that acknowledged sort of traditional ownership of land, and the Native Title Act was established, which recognises, the Indigenous custodians as owners of the land in this area. And so anything that was happening prior to the Native Title Act could continue happening with unabated. So the stations could just continue operating. Anything that happens after that is a change of the land use, you have to consult with the native title holders. And those native title holders are determined here by a representative body, the Northern Land Council. And within the Northern Land Council, there's anthropologists, and it's their role to work with the native title holders and senior men and senior women and senior people to establish who are the right people for the country. For gas, for instance, because it's been probably the biggest thing that's come in here, the gas industry needs to do full consultation with the native title holders. And that includes paying a royalty and also looking at business opportunities, job opportunities, training to go into those jobs and all of that.
Fracking is a polarizing issue among the wider native title holders population, and there's a strong belief by some that fracking can be done safely. Energy companies are taking their commitment to the community seriously, whether it's funding a football oval in the town of Elliott, creating jobs for remote residents, or giving native title holders an inside look at their operations.
This mob here who are involved with, say, TAM brands have really, they've embraced it. They're saying they want to do it. They're moving forward cautiously. They've been educated. They've been looking at this for early 2000s, really. So they're in negotiations and they will negotiate hard. They've got people representing them. They've got lawyers representing them. And there's a full process you have to go through. And the end result is what they call an Indigenous Land Use Agreement, which is an ILUA for short. And that ILUA spells out how things are going to operate and the royalty they get and everything like that.
The acceptance from native title holders and the government, along with a deeper understanding of the Northern Territory's subsurface, led to multiple people putting their hat in the ring. Now that we have a better understanding of Australia's geography, the people that reside, and the benefits of natural gas, let's get a clearer picture of what lies beneath. It's worth remembering that the Northern Territory's subterranean appeal is nothing new. If we jump back over a century, we'll see exploration in the Northern Territory actually dates back as early as the 1920s. Where hydrocarbons were first identified in the McArthur Basin, which again, the Beetaloo subbasin is a structural component of. When the tech caught up, surveys in 1967 recorded an unusual low-gravity anomaly that revealed the presence of the Beetaloo, confirming oil potential and shifting the focus to finding viable drilling sweet spots. Petroleum exploration in the Beetaloo area began in 1984, when Amoco drilled the Broadmere No. 1 well but encountered a dry hole, burning through 31 drill bits in the process. In 1985, the Bureau of Mineral Resources drilled vertical wells into the shale formations and identified live oil in the Urapunga No. 4 well, which intersected the Valkyrie shale formation at a relatively shallow depth. This promoted other companies to acquire permits and continue exploration. That year, Pacific Oil and Gas drilled 12 wells near the basin's core, conducted 2D seismic surveys, and confirmed source rock continuity with encouraging hydrocarbon shows. This brings us to the turn of the century, when the Beetaloo Basin emerged as a promising natural gas play, as I mentioned in the intro of the video. Thanks to the efforts of 4 American geologists, these Sweet Pea petroleum pioneers secured permits and drilled vertical wells for shale oil and gas in the 2000s. In 2007, Sweet Pea spudded the Shenandoah No. 1 well, reaching a depth of 5,000 feet with shows in the Kayala Shale Formation. Falcon Oil and Gas acquired permits in 2009, re-entered the same well as Shenandoah Number 1A, and extended it to 8,900 feet. And by 2011, they completed the first ever hydraulic fracturing operation in Australian shale, flowing modest amounts of gas from the Valkyrie and Kayala shale formations. Although Sweet Pea ultimately sold its interests, one of its founding geologists, Bob Bayless, still holds a royalty on the entire basin to this day. That year was also important because it was the time Hess came in and did significant 2D seismic surveys. During 2011 and 2012, Hess acquired almost 2,200 miles of 2D seismic data in the Beetaloo Basin at an estimated cost of $58 million USD. This 18-month program produced high-quality data, building on earlier work and advancing the basin's resource evaluation. Companies can then use this map to pinpoint accurate and potential drilling spots. In 2013, just as the industry hype was growing, Hess's lease contract with Falcon expired. Hess requested an extension but was denied, causing Hess to forfeit its right to earn a 62.5% stake in the 3 Beetaloo permits, even after investing tens of millions in exploration. Ouch. In 2015, Falcon put the acreage back on the market. Origin Energy and Sasol acquired the position. They would go on to make quite an impact on the Beetaloo, but more on that later. That year, a handful of projects began, including Santos, who drilled the Tanabarini No. 1, a vertical well, gathering a modern log and core rock samples from deep within the basin. The data revealed that the formation resembled commercial U.S. shale gas plays, with multiple zones available, which is a good thing considering it provides greater flexibility and a larger margin for error in identifying a viable play.
Multi-stacked, high pressure, high quality shale is what kind of we've seen as we've put together the regional picture. This is a basin that originally the rocks were laid down about 1.2 billion years ago. So think about what the world was then. It wasn't dinosaurs and organic matter, dying. It was algae. The algae is what got laid down, which created the hydrocarbons, the natural gas that we're looking to develop in the shale. So what that means is there's not a lot of complexity. So one of the unique things we saw as you've drilled vertical wells, you had very similar section across the whole 5 million acres, which is fascinating.
In August 2015, famous oil and gas entrepreneur Aubrey McClendon and his new company, American Energy Partners, almost made a deal to explore shale gas in Australia's Beetaloo Basin. This would have been McClendon's first project outside the US. He had already bought large positions in the major American energy areas and was interested in partnering with Brisbane-based Armour Energy, planning to invest hundreds of millions over 5 years to develop approximately 29 million acres of Armour's exploration rights in the McArthur Basin. Shortly after, AEP expanded its reach through partnerships with Private Co. and Sydney-based Imperial Oil and Gas, owned by Empire Energy. These deals would bring AEP's total access to over 55 million gross acres. Just to put that in perspective, comparing the basin to the US Appalachia will truly underscore the sheer ambition of McClendon's vision.
Aubrey McClendon was actually going to farm into our asset when he was at American Energy Partners. There was a deal fully papered up, ready to go, and unfortunately it never completed due to his unfortunate accident.
Aubrey's groundbreaking play, titled Project Thunder, came to an abrupt halt when he tragically died in a car crash in 2016. In light of Aubrey McClendon's passing, his headline-grabbing deals helped pave the way for major projects to continue in the Beetaloo Basin. That year, Origin and Sasol drilled the Amungi No. 1 well, aiming to gather evidence to counter an anticipating fracking moratorium from the Northern Territory government. Despite having comprehensive data from previous logs, there was still a risk encountering a dry well or poor flow rates. As the first horizontal fracking well in the Beetaloo Basin, Amungi No. 1 marked a historic milestone, striking gas just as a new policy ban was enacted. The well produced 1 million standard cubic feet of gas per day for 90 days, all from a short 600-foot lateral. The Amungi well changed everything. serving as a crucial commercial proof of concept for fracking and a gas play that is compared to the Marcellus in the US. However, with the fracking moratorium in place, Origin couldn't fully reap the benefits of their work.
And the notion of any fracking, for me, is a threat to life and a life that I would wish to protect.
The moratorium on hydraulic fracturing in the Northern Territory was placed on September 14, 2016, and shortly after, an inquiry was launched. There was a growing tide of opposition from Indigenous groups, environmentalists, and pastoralists, which are basically ranchers, who were collectively worried about pollution, water use, threatened species, and carbon emissions. A 15-month inquiry led by Justice Rachel Pepper concluded that the risk associated with the fracking industry could be managed if 135 recommendations were fully implemented. This scientific investigation is one of the largest environmental studies ever conducted in Australia, covering an area larger than Tasmania. It involved consultations with over 200 people and the examination of hundreds of underground water bores. During this time, members of the federal government, including then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, advocated for lifting the fracking ban to boost national gas supply. Both the Northern Territory and the federal governments aimed to ensure that any onshore shale gas production in the Northern Territory does not result in a net increase in life cycle greenhouse gas emissions in Australia. And in April 2018, the Northern Territory government lifted the moratorium on fracking. The government argues that developing an onshore gas industry is crucial for the territory's underdeveloped economy. While the report identified no new risks associated with fracking, some environmentalist groups criticized the study for having a too limited scope. The lifting of the moratorium was a big deal, especially since the Northern Territory is one of the few governments ever to ban fracking, but later reverse the ban and allow it again.
So the Northern Territory is, if we're talking to people in the United States, we're a state of Australia, but we're actually not a state, we're a territory. So we do operate a little bit differently to what a state would in Australia. We have two territories in Australia. We have the Australian Capital Territory and the Northern Territory.
The Northern Territory and the Australian Capital Territory in Australia share similarities with Puerto Rico and Washington, D.C. in the US, as both have their own local governments. The Northern Territory, in particular, is in a unique position due to its energy self-sufficiency, primarily relying on natural gas, which accounts for about 74% of its energy use. The rest of its energy mix includes oil and renewables, with zero coal-fired power. However, the current domestic energy supply is not sustainable in the long term.
We are short of gas in the Territory now. We've had an ongoing problem with current supply for the last 2 years. I've lost a bit of sleep over that, I have to say, about where we could source gas. Establishing the Beetaloo is really important for Northern Territorians, just for our own energy security.
No matter which side you're on, there's no doubt that the Beetaloo play will provide a sustainable energy supply, enabling the Northern Territory to transition towards renewable energy. The goal is to achieve 50% renewable electricity consumption by 2030. While offsetting any additional emissions from the fracking industry, which will be supported by the Australian federal government. There's also the economic benefits through royalties. These funds will support essential services such as schools, hospitals, housing, and other public services. Additionally, there will be broader economic benefits, including lower electricity bills, job creation, and increased development in remote regions.
We've got the highest percentage of Aboriginal people in the nation. Our population of Aboriginal people is 30%. They're our First Nations people here in Australia. And tragically, so many of those people live in deep poverty. That creates a whole heap of issues in their lives around life expectancy, health issues, education issues, domestic violence. And that's something we really want to improve. And in order to do that, if you can create more jobs in these remote communities and remote parts of the Northern Territory, if you can create more opportunities for mums and dads, for their kids to be able to get out of bed, go to work every day, contribute to their family and to a really good quality of life, it's just going to help raise everything in the Northern Territory, but most importantly for these people that are living out bush and are so often doing it really tough.
We've already highlighted the immense potential of the Beetaloo Basin, which contains more than enough gas to supply the Northern Territory's 250,000 residents. Additionally, there's a strategy in place to supply millions of people on Australia's east coast, and almost all of the pipeline to transfer the gas are already in place. But the benefits don't stop there.
The reality is we're the closest port to Asia. If you look sort of from here to the North Pole, a good 3-4 hours time zone to our east, to our west, half the world's population are north of us. And they're in the world's most rapidly growing economies, directly linked to energy and energy security. Those economies are currently 50% coal-fired, and so there's a huge opportunity for LNG.
LNG stands for liquefied natural gas, which is natural gas cooled to negative 260 degrees Fahrenheit, drastically reducing its volume to make transportation more efficient. In 2021, Australia exported a record 81.2 million tons of LNG, edging out Qatar to become the world's largest LNG exporter. Prior to 2006, Darwin had no involvement in the industry, but today, the city is home to two major LNG export terminals, Ichthys, operated by INPEX, and Darwin LNG, operated by Santos. Meanwhile, the Australian East Coast gas market faces supply shortages, pushing gas prices to between $7 and $12 million per cubic feet. In response, LNG import terminals are being developed to help meet the growing demand. And remember that quote from President Obama saying that the US has a supply of gas under their feet that can last them nearly 100 years? Well, it's estimated that the Beetaloo has enough shale gas stored to power Australia for 300. 4 years after the moratorium was lifted, the global pandemic in 2020 made it difficult to get people out in the field, delaying efforts to regain momentum and attract companies back to the Beetaloo. However, recent improvements in infrastructure, including major upgrades to sections of the Carpentaria Highway, have improved access, helping to accelerate exploration efforts in the region. If we continue the timeline from earlier, during the moratorium in 2017, Origin acquired Sasol's 35% interest in the Beetaloo joint venture, increasing its stake to 70%. In 2020, Origin increased interest in the Beetaloo permits even higher to 77.5% by covering an extra $16 million USD of Falcon's project costs over the next few years. However, social activism was intensifying in Australia, mirroring a global trend. At the same time, ESG, essentially a good behavior report card for businesses, was gaining prominence. And let's just say Origin wasn't making straight A's. Under mounting pressure from activist shareholders, the company decided to offload its non-producing assets, including those in the Beetaloo Basin. Origin had to keep drilling to earn their acreage from Falcon, but no one found it worth the risk in the 8-month timeframe that remained. That was until Tamboran came in. In September 2022, Origin said it would sell its exploration interests in the region to Tamboran Resources, an operator of several key exploration permits and its substantial shareholder, Brian Sheffield, a Texas oil man who's been watching this play from the sidelines since 2013. Sheffield wasn't the only one looking at these logs of the Beetaloo wells. Other operators had looked at it before. But Brian and Tamboran took the risk and hustled to drill the 2 remaining wells to earn the acreage. If they hadn't, Falcon could have taken it all back again to re-auction.
Tamboran, they were part of the Origin process, and Joel calls me up and he said, I got the deal. And like, I heard rumors it was ConocoPhillips or EOG, I didn't know. So they had to go to the third bidder, which was the lowest bid. Tamboran agreed to carry the last 2 wells to earn the farm out. Origin also got a royalty on it. He needed to raise like $80 million because he had to do the 2 drilling carries and pay $40 million. So he needed $120 million. He was just still short, and they had this open agreement with Origin to wait for him to figure out how to raise. And so I'll tell you what, I'll buy a royalty under all your permits, and then let's see where you get there and keep on trying to raise money. This has all happened over 6 weeks, going on at 12 o'clock at night. And then he calls me back and he's like, I'm still short. And then I say, okay, fine, I'll split the acreage with you. I look back and now it was an awesome move, and I'll split the acreage with you, but you got to continue to do the 2 drilling carries. Joel got the deal done. And that was the most important thing, to get the deal done. And he knew I didn't want to put any more money into it, his stock. And I knew that I was stepping across the line to get into this acreage privately. It meant that I'm gonna have to get very involved into this. And that's how we got the deal.
We were lucky because Tamboran, when we did the Origin deal with Brian, there were 2 carried wells in which we had to pay 100% cost on. So first well we drilled was an Origin location at the Amungi area. Basically, they had a rig on location. They wanted to drill that well. We picked up the keys, like we closed on a Wednesday and spudded that well on a Thursday. So
wow, that's crazy.
Back to back. People ask me a lot, why hasn't the Beetaloo been developed yet? Why has it taken over a decade to get to this point? And I think the short answer to that is because there hasn't been enough window of time to actually get active and to generate the information that you need for people to get excited about the commercialization of the basin, because it's been the headwinds that we've had with the regulations changing at the state level, regulations changing at the federal level. The timing was not right for the Beetaloo to attract a bigger company. And now that the regulations have been set, that gives the pathway for a bigger company to get comfortable around putting billions of dollars to work.
In August 2023, Tamboran, in joint venture with Brian Sheffield and Falcon Oil and Gas, started drilling a well called Shenandoah South 1H. They drilled 10,800 feet deep and discovered nearly 300 feet of shale rock with promising gas indicators. They then fracked 10 stages over a 1,600 foot section of the lateral, which is relatively short compared to the US average of 10,000 foot laterals. By February 2024, the company announced that the well produced an average of 3.2 million cubic feet per day over the first 30 days. The 60-day rate was 3.0 million, and the 90-day rate, 2.9 million. The fact that the production rate only slightly decreases from 3.2 to 2.9 million cubic feet per day over 90 days indicates that the well is maintaining a steady output. This gas flow rate was the highest ever recorded in a Beetaloo. With all this data and achievements, companies can now invest to bring in the advanced technology that has been developed over the past 20 years in North America. This includes the first modern frac spreads in Australia from leading service providers like Baker Hughes, Liberty Energy, Schlumberger, H&P, and Halliburton, which will be crucial for cutting production times in half on future projects in the Beetaloo. And the cherry on top is that this prominent point of the gas-rich basin is only 20 miles away from existing pipeline infrastructure to connect to the East Coast. Once connected, it's off to the races. Research indicates this play could create thousands of jobs and generate billions in government revenue. The Northern Territory is on the brink of one of the most transformative 5-year periods in its history, poised to fully capitalize on this potential.
We've got this incredible opportunity sitting in front of us. There's no reason why Texas, being the energy capital of the United States, there's no reason why Northern Territory and Darwin can't come the energy capital of Australia and absolutely drive, energy right through Asia and up into Japan and around the world.